The most powerful thing I have ever learned as a person with Asperger syndrome to command respect, I'm going to share with you at the very end of this video. Okay, we've got 7 things that are vitally important. The first one we're going to spend a little bit more time on because it too is vitally important. But you know, people with Asperger syndrome are particularly vulnerable to those who would take advantage of us, and to do that, they have to some degree, disrespect us. But once we are aware of what to look out for, and once we are aware of how to defend ourselves, then maybe, we're not going to command respect from everybody all the time, because nobody does that. But if we apply these principles, then maybe we can take the edge off of that disrespect to the point where, okay, we find ourselves being more respected. And if we're more respected, then we're more accepted. And if we're more accepted, then we can be more functional and more successful in life. All right, number 1 is this, and this should be kind of obvious, but for some reason to people with Asperger syndromes, the things that are most obvious are often the things we overlook the most. And number 1 is this: command your space. Now, let me explain that by reminding you that there are some critters. There are a lot of animals who, if they're in danger, they will make themselves look bigger to make themselves look more dangerous. Somebody you don't want to mess around with. And there's some other critters out there that will make themselves look bigger to make themselves more attractive. Kind of like the peacock, you know? So what we're talking about is making ourselves bigger to respect our own space so other people respect us. So that number 1, we're more attractive, and number 2, it's a little bit intimidating. But we don't want to do this to the point where we are over-intimidating other people. That will have the opposite effect. All right, now, let's stop and think through this for just a moment. How do we apply this? How do we make ourselves bigger? I don't know about you, but I don't have any feathers. I could dress in such a way that, like some tribal people, will put on war paint, and they'll put on, literally put on feathers in their hair to make them look more terrifying. To me, that doesn't look terrifying, but apparently to other tribes, it looks scary. So we could do that, but I don't think that's going to work, you know? You want to put on war paint, go to the grocery store, help yourself. Halloween time, that may work. But I don't think it's going to make you attractive, and I don't think it's going to intimidate anybody, but at least you'll be acceptable. But you just got that one day out of the year. Okay, so how do we make ourselves bigger? How do we claim our space? Now, I recall back, I must have been 12 years old. Maybe 13, I don't know, just that age where you're just about to become a teenager, and one of the things I love to do is go out in the alley behind our house. We lived in an inner city area, and I would shoot baskets. Sometimes other kids would come along and they'd play with you, and I was all alone this day, and one of the neighborhood girls came along, and she wanted to shoot baskets with me, so sure, would shoot. But then she started doing something that I found really bothersome. Now, you may find this hard to believe, but hard to believe that I would find it bothersome. But she got just a little bit aggressive in her flirtiness, and she wanted to touch me and grab me and hold me and kind of playfully wrestle around with me. I mean, not on the ground, but kind of push and all that. And I don't like to be touched. Back then, I know you find it hard to believe, but back then, I didn't want this girl touching me. So I needed to somehow expand my space, to respect my space, to claim my space. And I think punching her in the face wouldn't accomplish much, probably get me in trouble, and that thought didn't even occur to me. Pushing her away, she probably would think I was playing with her and she'd push me back. But what popped in my mind was this. I held up my hand And I showed her my wrist, and I said, do you see this? Do you see this pink on my wrist? And she kind of looked at it, and I told her, well, that's poison ivy, and don't touch me because you'll catch poison ivy. So what I was doing is I was respecting my space and trying to make it look to her advantage to respect my space. Now, I got to admit, I was lying. I didn't. People with Asperger's are almost painfully honest, but not always. And this is one of those exceptions. I didn't have poison ivy. In fact, my arm wasn't even pink. I just said that. And apparently she saw something she thought was pink, or she believed me. And so she backed off. I commanded my space. No problem. There are other ways you can command your space or respect your space, so others will respect your space, and that is just being a little bit animated. And again, this comes very unnatural to people with Asperger syndrome because we tend to have that flat effect. We have that poker face, but that's also true of our entire bodies. We don't give tells. We're just we have not just flat effect with our face, but we have flat effect with our body language. And so making hand gestures and pointing and rocking back and forth and maybe pacing a little bit, that just doesn't come natural to us. I mean, the closest we get is stimming. You know, I rock all the time, especially if I'm in a place like a restaurant or whatever. I just sit there and rock. I think it drives my wife nuts, but, you know, it makes me feel good. But we need to do that. I mean, if rocking is something that kind of claims your space or whatever, you need to do that. I recall one time I was at an airport. I hate airports. If I were rich, I would own my own jet airplane. And I love to fly. I just don't like the process of getting on the airplane or being in the airplane with a crowd of people. But flying itself, I think, is fun. But I was standing in line at an airport, and apparently I was standing, unbeknownst to me, too close to the woman in front of me, a young woman, probably in her late teens, early 20s. And she was wearing a backpack, and I wasn't, I wasn't even thinking about it. But what she did to back me off is she just started turning back and forth like this, where her backpack kind of pushed into me. So I got the message, and I backed off. Well, what she was doing is she was respecting her space, and she wanted me to do the same thing, and it worked. But one thing I love to do besides fly is I love public speaking. I was going to say I love to give speeches, but that sounds kind of corny. I love public speaking. And something happens that's very different for me when I'm public speaking is I'm not inhibited at all. Now, when I'm around small groups of people in the crowd, when I'm in the crowd, I feel very inhibited, put them together, you make a new word. I feel very inhibited, and I want to get out of there. It's kind of like standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon if you have a fear of heights. I don't like to be in people, but in front of people, I'm perfectly okay. Now, explain that. I don't know, maybe I'm role-playing, but I've always felt comfortable and actually enjoy public speaking. And one of the things I do when I'm public speaking, and I did this even in speech class when I was in high school, is I own the space, I own the platform. I would pace back and forth, and I found that if you do that, pace back and forth, it burns up that nervous energy. And I would use hand gestures, not obnoxiously, but when appropriate, and I would lean in and do some other things and use facial expressions, and that worked. Now, when you're in a one-on-one situation, you don't want to go that extreme, do you? I don't. Pace back and forth and flail your hands around, probably not a good idea, but own your space. That's the principle that should be learned from public speaking. It's when you're talking to an individual, this is my space, I'm going to own it. If I want to raise my arms or twist back and forth or take a step backward or forward or whatever, what I'm doing is I am signaling to the individual that this is my space, I respect it, and I expect you to respect it, but you do it in such a way that you're not bullying the person, you're not intimidating the person, you're just sending You're just sending a signal that they pick up on. And who knows, maybe they will do the same thing and they will probably respect you for it. All right, that takes us to number 2. Now, these next 6 points we're not going to spend a lot of time on, so pay close attention because we're going to talk kind of fast. But number 2 is this: focus on first impressions. When you're making a first impression, and that's anytime anybody encounters you for the first time, you've got one chance to make that first impression. Now, this was difficult for me to apply, but I found it worked once I learned how to do this. And there was a speaker in our college that suggested this, and he said when you're walking anywhere for any reason, try to make eye contact with a person who is approaching you, or somebody you happen to be passing. I don't like to make eye contact with anybody for any reason. Maybe that's why I like public speaking. You don't have to look them in the eye. But, okay, I tried it, and I did it by making a game out of it to see who would make eye contact first. Now, here's how you get out of it, because you don't want to keep that eye contact. That's just weird, you know? But he went on and he said this: as soon as the other person returns eye contact, speak. Say, hi, how you doing? Nod to them, do something, wave. How are you? And what happens when you do that? You are making a positive first impression that says, I am not afraid. I respect myself. Does this always work? Yeah, most of the time it does, but not all the time. I shouldn't say that, but most of the time. Now, I told you we're going fast. So number 3 is this: beware of shark bumps. Maybe we should go over these one at a time in future videos. If you think so, leave a comment in the comments section. Shark bump. Okay, that needs some explaining, right? All right, a shark bump is this. They say that when... and I learned this from a criminologist, by the way, but they say when a shark is eyeballing a prey, that what they will do first, before they eat the prey or attack the prey, they will bump into it to see what kind of resistance that potential prey is going to give them. And the criminologist said that criminals will do the same thing. Before they pull a gun on you, before they try to rob you, before they tackle you or whatever a criminal does, they will, not literally, but they will bump into you. For example, they may say something like, hey man, you got a light? That's a shark bump. Trying to see what kind of person you are, how you are reacting. So throughout all of life, I have noticed that other people are constantly giving shark bumps. Now, they're not criminals. Obviously, they're not sharks, but what they're doing is they are subconsciously, or maybe even unconsciously, checking you out. And they don't even know they're doing it. But you need to be aware of that. The people are constantly being sharks. And maybe it's not because they see you as prey. Maybe they just want to see if you're worth respecting. And so they bump into you. Very subconscious. Very subliminal, but they bump into you like a shark. See what you're made of. See what you're like. See what your personality is. Getting just a tiny little bit of feedback. So be aware of those. And when you are aware that people are doing that, when you're out and about, just kind of acknowledge it. And in so doing, believe it or not, you are commanding a little bit more respect. Are these helping you any? If they are, let me know which one is helping you the most. Okay. Number 4 is this. Number 4 is speak to the period. Again, that probably requires a little bit of explanation. But if you have ever had a conversation with another person, I'm guessing you have had that experience multiple times. You may not like it, but you've had it. And as you're speaking to this person, the other person will abruptly interrupt you because they don't respect you. What do? Well, you are in the middle of a sentence and this other person rudely interrupted you. Well, what you need to do is finish your sentence. be aware that people do that, and when they do, don't stop talking. They're the ones being rude, and you keep talking is not being obnoxious. You're just respecting your space. You are respecting yourself, and you are saying subliminally that you are expecting them to respect what you have to say. Now, there are very few exceptions to this rule. I know when I ran for governor about 20 years ago and did a lot of interviews. And some of the interviewers, just their style of interviewing, they would ask a question, you'd get out about 10 words, and they'd ask another question. Well, I could have finished it, but I understood this is how some interviewers like to do it, so I would let them get away with it. Outside of that, I can't think of too many other exceptions. Number 4, again, is speak to the period. Finish your sentence. Number 5, okay, this one again, going to need some explanation, is be square. Hear what I'm saying. I did not say be a square. I said be square. Now, what does that mean? Well, that's kind of related to what we talked about at the very outset of respecting your space so other people will respect it. But one of the ways to do this is when you're talking to somebody, square yourself up to them. Face to face, eyes to eyes, chin to chin, shoulders to shoulders. Don't stand sideways. If you're sitting, if you can, stand up because the person standing commands the conversation in most cases. Make sure that you are facing the individual. Kind of hard to do when you're sitting at a table and the person next to you wants to talk to you. That's virtually impossible. But general rule is square yourself. Be square. Number 6 is this. Speak first. That does not require much of an explanation. We kind of touched on that earlier. That when you're talking to somebody or when you're being addressed, make it a point to face them with perfect alignment, eye to eye, shoulder to shoulder, and then be the first to speak. Now, what if you're not in conversation already? What if you're just passing the person? And we talked about this a little bit before, but say hi. Or what if you're in a group of people, or maybe you're sitting on a subway? Do you take a subway? I don't. There's none even around here, but I used to take a bus when I was a teenager, and you sit next to people, and nobody would talk. You're in a room with strangers, nobody talks. You're in a restaurant, in a line at a restaurant, nobody talks. Say you're in a shopping mall, if they even exist anymore, I don't go to them, or Walmart. You see a person, just practice. They don't know you, they're never going to see you again. So what do you got to lose? Be the first to speak. How you doing? They may think you're a little weird, but go ahead and try it. Again, they don't know you. You'll never see them again. It's not going to hurt. So when you're out in life, just living your life, think of that as a laboratory. My life and my thinking is a laboratory. I call it life's laboratory. I am nearly 70 years old, and all these things that I am teaching you, I have learned from life's laboratory. There was one point that I learned in college, but all this other stuff I just learned from observing, from life's laboratory. So think of yourself in a laboratory, wherever you happen to be. Try out a few things. Don't be over-aggressive, because if you do, it could have bad consequences, but you can try a little. You can try looking people in the eye and then say hello. You can be the first to speak when you encounter other individuals. All right, number 7. This is the single most important thing that I have ever done that almost every time commands respect. And it's really a very simple, easy thing to do. When you are talking to another person, remember we said shoulder to shoulder, eye to eye, chin to chin, face to face, toe to toe. What you do, are you ready for this? Is you just step in. Just a little bit. Now, nobody wants that person who gets in their face and talks to them. That can be annoying. But everybody has this sense of personal space. And what you want to do is kind of guess, because you don't know for sure. There's no line drawn. But you have to guess where that other person's space is. And for most of us, we can tell because we know where our space is. So I know where the line is subconsciously, I guess. I mean, again, it's invisible. But I know what's too close for me, so I will go right to that line, wherever it happens to be, and go over just a little bit. And in so doing, you're getting into that person's space. And I have never seen this to fail, because that throws them off guard. I was going to say it makes them a little uncomfortable, and it does, but it throws them off guard. It says that you're in command, you're in control, you're not taking any guff, best word I can use, off of them. But you don't want to, again, you don't want to literally get in the guy's face or the girl's face, because that's too much. Then they become defensive. Or they become offended. That's not the objective. The objective here is just to communicate, hey, respect me. I respect you, you respect me, and by stepping in just a little bit, I find that that works. Really works. Okay, so you're someplace where you need to talk to a customer service rep, and you're wanting to make sure you get what you want without yelling at the person. Step in. Okay, you may need to lean in if you're at a counter, but just get a little bit closer than what they think is comfortable. Make them, just throw them off just a tiny bit, make them a little bit uncomfortable. And I'm telling you, that's number 7. That is the single most effective thing that I have ever done. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end. We will see you next time, and in the meantime, we have a lot of videos. A lot of good information. A couple of them are displayed on the screen right now. So in the meantime, till we see you next presentation, take a look at some of those.